Hi, and welcome to the 2021 Humanities for the Public Good Symposium. So happy to have you here. My name is Annette Rodriguez. I'll be your host for this evening's or this afternoon's session, depending on where you're viewing from. We're really excited for today's conversation and also to field your questions after the film, The Whistle. So please make sure to type those in the chat as they come to mind. In case you're not already aware, our host this week is the Humanities for the Public Good initiative. And this is an Andrew W. Mellon funded initiative that works to connect scholars and communities within and beyond UNC Chapel Hill. Now, before we get started, we feel it's important as stewards of public engagement to acknowledge that the triangle overlaps with the historic territories of the Siouan, Iroquoian, and Algonquin indigenous communities. Today, their descendants belong to sovereign nations that continue to resist systemic erasure. Let us honor them, whose land we are on, and the enslaved people who built the wealth and laid the foundation for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We recognize the persistent realities of that history, and we invite you to work beside us to create change. Now, for today's conversation, after the film, The Whistle, we're really excited to welcome our special guests who are here with us now, StormMiguel Florez, the producer and director of The Whistle. Hey, StormMiguel.
Hello.
And Charlene Padilla Johnson, who is one of the stars of the film. Would either of you like to say a little something to our viewers in Cyberlandia who are going to get a really beautiful, sweet piece of lesbian Albuquerque history today?
You want to start, Shar, or do you want me to start? All right. Thank you all so much for having us here. I just want to first acknowledge that I am on Yalamu Ramaytush Ohlone land, so-called San Francisco. And I am so excited to be here and share this film with you all and have a conversation afterwards with my homies. And you'll find out more about that, but we all go way back, all of us. So that's exciting. And so, yeah, this is a film about LGBTQ history that we don't normally get to hear about. So often we hear about histories in bigger cities and, more well-known movements. And this was this thriving community that was going on in the 70s and 80s in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the Southwest. And so specifically focusing mainly on the lesbian youth community of that time. Most of the folks you see are talking about times when they were in high school and about the community of lesbians that we all had there. And I say I was part of that community. You'll see in the film, I'm transgender. And at the time I identified as a lesbian and still strongly connect to that part of myself and that part of my history and community. I'm really excited for y'all to see it.
And I'm excited as well. I'm thrilled to be part of this, and to be part of this with Annette, who is also from Burque, and excited that we can all sort of reconnect here in this venue. So I'm just excited to share this film with you, which I'm so proud of, and yeah, and it'll be fun to talk to you later also.
Yeah, so this is so great. We not only have this documentary, which is an award-winning documentary available to us thanks to Humanities for the Public Good, but we also get to speak to one of the stars of the film, Charlene, who I've known for quite a while, has been, such a blessing in my life. So fortunate to know her. I always talk about her as becoming the next mayor of Burque, and so I'm really still pushing on that. And of course, StormMiguel, who who I remember as just one of the most attractive folks in our high school. By far, but I was a freshman, so never had the courage to talk to Storm at the time. But so we can get into that great high school stuff. But so for you all who are watching the film, you're now going to go to your magic link. So the way today works is you all will move from this platform into the link to see the film. The film runtime is about 57 minutes or so. And so everyone who's registered, and you've found yourself here, so you've registered, received an email with the link for the film. So you'll click on that link and you'll have the password for the film. The great folks here at HPG have also put that information over in the chat, right? So just at this point, make sure to log on to that link. You'll need your magic password. Now, the reason we're going to this link is because what's great about having the film on Vimeo is that it allows us to have subtitles in both English and Spanish. And so we thought that was an important thing to have for you all today. So film runtime, 57 minutes. Get comfortable. Get ready for all the feels. You may have some high school flashbacks yourselves. Make sure to let us know if you have questions in the chat now, or as we come back in about an hour to talk with our wonderful filmmaker and with one of the stars of The Whistle. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy that you all have the chance to see this really sweet film, and I'm going to have to take a minute to pull myself out of the feels um, to get our conversation going. As a reminder, you can send your questions for our guests, Charlene and StormMiguel, using the chat function. And so today we're so fortunate to have the director and the producer of The Whistle, StormMiguel Florez, and Charlene Padilla Johnson, who you met in the film with us. Charlene Padilla Johnson is a Chicana, a queer lesbian raised in rural Belen, New Mexico, and Albuquerque. Charlene works with various LGBTQIA organizations in Albuquerque, past and present, including Women, Equality New Mexico, the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, and GLSEN Albuquerque. Her profession as a community and regional planner, which she discussed briefly in the film, allows Charlene to travel the state working closely with rural and tribal communities to create resilient places that are successful for all community members. She lives in Albuquerque with her really wonderful partner, Aaron, and their two pups, Hatch and Georgia. And StormMiguel Florez, our filmmaker, is a trans, queer, Chicane event and media producer, actor, lifelong musician. He was a 2020 San Francisco Virtual Pride Community Grand Marshal and a recipient of the NALAC, the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures grant, the San Francisco Arts Commission and Horizons Foundation's grants, and originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which he very much considers to be his homeland, and has lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 24 years. There he lives with his partner, Annalise Ophelian, who was the director of photography for The Whistle, and they enjoy working on each other's films and spoiling their 3 chihuahuas. So for those of you who were coveting StormMiguel's wrecked baseball cap, you may want to check out stormflorez.com. I think they may be sold out. I got to snatch one up, but maybe with enough pressure, StormMiguel will make some available to us. So thank you both for being here. Really appreciate you, and thank you all for joining us. So one of the questions I really wanted to start us off with is this is such a deeply local and specific story of New Mexican lesbian culture. And so I wanted to know from both of you why it was important to tell this, such a deeply local specific story. And Charlene, why did you want to participate in the telling of this story?
Let me see. Okay, I'll unmute.
There you are.
Okay, got it. But before we get started, I didn't get a chance earlier, and as I started talking, I forgot to say that Albuquerque is actually on the ancestral land of the Pueblo of Sandia, and New Mexico is on the ancestral lands of 19 pueblos, 3 Apache tribes, and the homeland of the Dene people of the Navajo Nation. So we have a lot of indigenous heritage here. So speaking of local, right? It really came about, and StormMiguel, I'll go ahead and tell the little story of how we started this whole thing. And that was, Erin, who I mentioned in the film, is from Indiana, and we had talked about, she was always just really fascinated, and not just Erin, but lots of people that I've talked to over the years were fascinated about this little subgroup and that was going on in Albuquerque in the 70s and 80s, and was just like kind of, wishing it that she had that herself. And StormMiguel was over at our house, and we were talking about it, and Erin was telling me, oh, you should write a book. And, it just didn't quite gel, didn't quite feel right. And then it just, we started talking about a film, and StormMiguel picked it up and said, you know what, that's a that sounds like a great idea. I should go with that. And I think the film was a great way to present this, because you get to see Albuquerque. I mean, I love the vistas and all of the beautiful the filmmaking of the surroundings. I think Albuquerque becomes such like a character in the film, which is really wonderful. But there is something very grounded about that community in Albuquerque, and how New Mexico and Albuquerque sort of built us in a way.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, as I was watching it, of course, having been away for over a year now, that my first love is all over this film, which is the Sandia Mountains, right? I mean, just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous work on revealing the beauty of the place in so many different ways, StormMiguel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it felt very important to have Albuquerque just be so present, because that's where, like, I think there's something about Albuquerque, there's something about New Mexico that when you're there, you're part of the landscape. You see it everywhere. It's, I'm in San Francisco and I have to drive to go see the ocean. I have to drive different, or get on Muni, or, I have to go see things. There's a lot I can see around me that is very San Francisco, but I generally have to travel to see it. In New Mexico, pretty much anywhere you are, you know where you are. You look around and you see the Sandias every single day of your life there. And they felt important to have that, because it's just like anywhere you are in the city, there's a view of the Sandias. And so we're talking about all these high schools, and we're talking about all these folks from all over Albuquerque. And, we always think about how we're always looking up at the same sky. We're always looking up at the same mountain as well. And so it just, the beauty of that felt important to share in the film. And it being in, it feels important to tell this story. I think most of the stories we tend to hear, and I said this at the beginning, tend to be from metropolitan areas or well-known movements when we think about LGBTQ history. And this was something that, like Charlene, when I would talk to people about it elsewhere when I was older, because everybody, what we do as queers, we get together and we tell our origin stories a lot of the time, right? We talk about, well, tell me your coming out story. And so with each other, I want to say specifically. And, anytime I told people that story from elsewhere, people were always just like, wait, you had a whistle? Wait, there were how many of you? Like, they just couldn't believe, even people from bigger cities just couldn't believe that we had that many of us around at that age. And so I started to understand that was unique. And so it wasn't necessarily that I needed to tell a story about New Mexico. It was that I needed to tell this story that Aaron actually really kind of pushed me to tell. I didn't know that I wanted to direct a movie. I usually I like to do post-production, but I'm so glad that I did, because it was such a gift to get to revisit this moment and these folks, and hear everybody else's stories and start to find out more about where this whistle did come from, which I never thought we would.
And it sort of gets revealed a little bit. I mean, there's sort of, not a precise origin, right? But I think that's what was so wonderful about the film, is that, there's so many connections that are intergenerational. And for that connection with the whistle that may have come from the mercados, maybe in Juarez, right, just south of the border, there's also that connection too. And so as you were doing the film and asking folks, I mean, did you sort of ask each person, do you know where it came from? And did everyone have a different story, or was it, sort of a mystery and you solved it as the film went on?
Well, it's interesting. Because what I thought was going to happen is I thought we were going to call it the whistle. That was going to be kind of the premise, and that we were never going to find anything out, right? But
right.
That's the trajectory I thought we were going to go, is that I would ask everybody questions, and eventually we'd really not know anything. But what happened was, at the very beginning, I was sharing kind of teaser trailers so that I could get folks interested in telling their stories. So I had a phone interview with Charlene, I had a phone interview with Molly, and an interview with Havens. And I put together just some photographs and, said, this is the story we're telling, and some of the preliminary footage we had gotten of the landscape. And I put it on Facebook, and people started sharing it. And I saw on somebody's feed who had shared it that there was a bunch of comments, and one of the comments was, wait, what? Some guy's making who's making a movie about us? I don't know. Some dude's making a movie about us. And this is like hilarious thing where I'm like, oh, I need to, that's a whole other story right there, is about how I needed to kind of come out while telling the story. But one person commented, I started the whistle. And I was just like, excuse me, what? Can we talk? And so we started chatting in private messenger. It was Gloria. And like she says in the film, she thought she started the whistle, but then as she started to do research, she realized where it came from, or how it was brought into the Albuquerque bike community. And but she was just so immediately generous with information. Like, she told me about how she started it, but then she came back soon after and said, hey, wait a minute. I didn't start it. This other person started it, and her phone number doesn't work anymore. And I don't know, I'm going to go to her house. So she went over to Vern's house, like she hadn't seen her in years, and connected with Vern. And that's how we started. That's how we were able to talk to Vern, get more information, and get the pictures of Jody and the history about Jody bringing Vern to El Paso. And so that was something I did not expect, but it was something that happened more on the front end. I didn't tell anybody. I don't think I told anybody who I was interviewing that I knew, because I did want to hear what they had to say. So I did ask everybody, where do you think the whistle came from? And everybody had thoughts and ideas, and it was a lot of I don't know.
Yeah. I'm thinking too about like this, these great these moments. Like, there's so much sweetness in the film. So I mean, there is homophobia, there is self-protection, there is disguise and codes and words that only folks in the community know, like wrecked, right? But there's so much sweetness in this, and I wonder if Charlene and StormMiguel, you can tell us a little more about, tell us about the state fair, tell us about the mall, tell us about, I remember the lockers, right? I remember there was a particular sort of hallway of lockers, that I got orientated to, and I heard the whistle, but I never responded, right? And so, so tell us about, sort of what it felt like, in your full out adult consciousness, to go back to those moments. And like, how often were you whistling?
Back then?
Yeah.
Like all the time. It was like, I think.
All the time.
I think it was just our friends who would whistle. I don't think I ever stopped. I mean, I still whistle. Like, I whistle daily to like my dogs.
So you still got that whistle muscle going.
Well, I recently lost a tooth. I have a little retainer in right now, but I had to get a tooth pulled, and so I'm waiting to get the implant, and my whistle has gotten real weak. So I'm very sad about that, but hopefully that's not the case when the tooth comes back.
Yeah.
But I don't know, do you want to say anything, Shar, about just how often?
Like Storm said, I mean, we were whistling in public a lot, all the time. And it's funny, I think Molly's the one that says state fair.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that, and I love that she said that. That is so Albuquerque. And,
right.
I mean, for those of you that are out there that in Albuquerque, state fair is a big thing in Albuquerque, because it's this big, it's the state fair, but, we have this big, huge fairgrounds. It's in the middle of the city. Everyone, especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, everyone went to the state fair. And I can remember, going around the Midway, with a little group of friends, and inevitably you would run into dykes. No question, especially if you went in the evening, and you'd be wandering around and you'd hear, and it was crowded and there was all these other people there, but you would, you'd hear a whistle, you'd turn, you'd maybe find people you knew or new people. And it's not like someone would whistle and you'd go, oh, let's go talk to them. It was more like did you hear that? Who was that? It was almost little, it was like a little fun little thing sometimes. And, sometimes it would lead to conversations, sometimes it wouldn't. But But anyways, yeah, but it was, I mean, I think when she says state fair, she's sort of explaining that like it's this in big crowded areas is when we would do it. And then when there was a lot of people, the mall, the state fair, games. Yeah, that was the most fun.
Yeah. There was also getting whistled at. So, you know, you'd be by yourself at the state fair, the mall.
Fantastic.
You hear somebody whistle, you turn around and think it's your friends or something. And sometimes it was just a group of strangers with mullets and they'd be like that. And you'd like,
right.
Yeah, because after the whistle, you got the like, you know, the head right. tilt.
I can remember being in like Sears, you know, with the big, huge, round clothing racks and like walking around. I think Tina and I were like, go this way, go that way. No, I heard it over here. And we would walk.
That's funny.
It was great.
Wow. It's like echolocation for dykes, you know, for young dykes, right? Yeah. I mean, I heard the whistle a lot and I was not sporty. But, you know, I heard it often enough to know, you know, that it indicated something specific. And there's a person who's in some of the photos in this film, who you know, StormMiguel knows what I'm thinking about, but someone, you know, who very early on I realized like, oh, this is a dyke, right? This is like I've heard about this in church.
Yeah.
And you know, and I'm having some feelings, right? But right. You know, those sort of markers of that were so different, right? It wasn't, you know, as much clothing markers, although StormMiguel always had the best fedoras and you know, blazers,
bolo ties.
I mean, very up on the fashion. Yeah. But you know, that idea that there was, you know, just sort of these codes. And so, you know, as you all think about, you know, one of the folks in the film talks about how it's so different now, right? That that folks are really embracing visibility, representation, right? It's almost an expectation. And so I wonder how you all felt about, you know, this film that's thinking through a time in our history when invisibility was the norm, right? And so, you know, what did it feel like to be back in that sort of space again?
Yeah.
Do you start, Shah?
Yeah. You know, I think what's been interesting for me, anyways, and I've heard this from some of the other cast members too, is, you know, there's a way that you kind of go through your life and you go, okay, that was what happened. That's the way we were. That's, you know, it just was normal. And I think this film has really caused all of us to really look back and go, wow, did we really, that's what we did, you know, and that's how we survived. And that's how we managed. And it's been so reflective. I think like all of us have just been reflecting a lot about how life was, I guess, then, because we're all, like you see in the film, we're all very, you know, we're married, we have kids, we're doing all these things, and all of us are out. It's just so, I can't believe how many of us are married. It's no, I'm just kidding. But it's, you know, it's interesting.
Right.
And, you know, I think all of us have looked back on it and just been really, I think it's just been really introspective for all of us. I know it has been for me. And just sort of, you know, thinking about myself as a teenager and a young adult, and the choices that I made and didn't make, and some that were, you know, just, I think, sort of surviving in that system.
Yeah.
You know, and forgetting of what that system was then. I think at the last, you know, I've mentioned this before, but that you don't, I mean, when I thought about, oh my gosh, it was the 80s. It was the Reagan 80s that I was a teenager in, doing all this stuff. And I don't think I connected that then. And it wasn't until recently that I went, oh, wait a minute. That was that. You know, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, it is. even though it is different now, obviously, some of the same battles, just, same frickin' battles, different clothing. And I don't get completely discouraged, but sometimes I do. I'll be honest with you. I think this week and the past month or so have been very discouraging with all the trans stuff, and the, trans bills coming down have been just heartbreaking. And, I don't think it will last. I just don't, because I think the world won't let it last in a way, but it's still hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that, we were just living our lives back then, right? And there weren't laws specifically being made against us at that time. Yeah. Maybe there were existing laws, right? What came next was undoing some of those existing laws, thinking about like the sodomy laws, right? Those were kind of just around the like late 80s, 90s, like people were starting to fight those and win. And then, so then things start to kind of happen, and we start to like become more visible, and we get to be on TV shows, and we get to see ourselves in movies. And so there's all these ways that we get to see ourselves reflected. But again, like I say in the film, like there's just a lot of violent pushback that comes with that. And I think that, at the time we did not expect to see ourselves represented in the ways that we do now. And there's still a long, long way to go. But we didn't expect even this much. And we didn't expect that someday we'd be able to get married or adopt. Like, I think for a lot of us, that was just not even in the realm of possibility, or just like, it was just like, yeah, right. So we knew what our lives were in a way. We knew. And so, but we had the thing we had that was so special and that kept us alive and that kept us going and that kept us okay was community. And I think that was the saving grace when people don't have that community. And that's where, when I talk to people and they talk about how they didn't have that, like they were lacking community, so they didn't get to be who they were in a way that felt safe. And we at least got to be who we were in not only a way that felt safe, but a way that felt like really, really celebrated, which I think is really unique. So so going back to that time, in a way, it's a continuum of everything. Like it didn't really feel like going back to a time in my life. It felt like, visiting a part of myself that I'm very familiar with. It didn't really feel like going back and uncovering things about myself. But I know for some people who were interviewed, it did. For some people, they hadn't thought about that time in a long time. And it was hard. It was hard for some of the folks to bring up some of it, to start thinking about those things and talking about them. And for some of us, that wasn't really the case. It was more like, again, just a kind of continuum, like those parts of myself, I can say for myself, has just always been with me. And those memories have always been with me, because that was actually as hard as it was. I would never want to repeat that age. But as hard as it was, there's, I really see how it shaped me and how good it was too. And, the great things that happened at that time and how unique it was.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary, film, and evoking that also in folks who are being introduced to this kind of subculture, right? We have a question from Aaron asking StormMiguel, have you kept in touch with the interviewees in the film? Was creating the film a sort of reunion? And Charlene, what was the community's response getting to hear these shared stories?
These are great questions. I love these. Yes, so some folks I had kept in touch with, clearly Charlene and a couple other folks in the film, but then there were some folks who I hadn't talked to in years. And it was interesting because I had to kind of go back and reintroduce myself as StormMiguel. And as being trans, having transitioned and no longer identifying as a lesbian, and people not necessarily going to recognize me if I haven't seen them for that long. I haven't been in Albuquerque consistently for a long time. So I had to go back and reintroduce myself to folks. And that was hard. That was a little, not scary, just, a little bit, because I didn't know how people were going to respond. And because there is transphobia within the queer and LGBTQ community. So I had to just like brace for that. And I never had to come across that, which was great. People were really just wonderful and like, oh man, you look good. Good to see you. And, so that was really cool to get to reintroduce myself to folks and have that immediate acceptance and love. And then then there are the folks that I met. And that was also like a really huge gift. So yeah, it was this kind of combination of people I stayed in touch with, people who I hadn't been in touch with in a long time, and people who I then got to start to build friendships with for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, when the debut of the film was here in Albuquerque, and, StormMiguel and I had talked about it before. Albuquerque is kind of a big, small town, and obviously there's limited folks in this movie. I mean, we talk about that there was the queer, the lesbian community then was big. And so there's very, very small slice of what in the movie, but we really wanted to hopefully represent well with that group. And I think honestly, I think the film does that so well. And I think especially because of Bern and Louise and Glow and, and then at the end, there was some other folks that came to like that little reunion that we had. And you see some footage of that, but that's just really great because that's, a generation, a little bit, well, not fully generation, but some folks that are older than StormMiguel and me and stuff like that. So anyways, but when we had the opening in Albuquerque, it was just StormMiguel. It was like a miracle.
It was amazing.
It was amazing. It was one of the most important live nights of my life. Honestly, it was just so beautiful, and the place was sold out, and there was so many people there, and like people that I had known and seen, for so long that I hadn't seen in a long time. And they were happy. They were so happy about it. And it was just great. And what was great was to hear people laugh about some of the inside jokes, like the wrinkle room thing and,
Right.
and some of those little insider things there was just laughter, and it was just great. And so it's gotten a really great reception in Albuquerque, and that's been really wonderful.
Yeah. I remember when, the screening that I went and saw when it was shown again, and folks do not want to leave the theater. You've got so like these old dykes can remember crickets, or foxes or whatever. And so, it feels like not only talking about the community as it was then, but, rebuilding that community space for folks again in these really sort of beautiful ways. I mean, that was afterward, I remember when we went to see it, my sister went to the same high school. Charlene's sister and I were in the same high school class together. And it was just, you didn't want the film to end because we were realizing how much of these experiences intersected, right? And sort of how beautiful it was to have them, again, as you're saying, not all traumatic, though there's certainly, difficult moments, but so much celebration, like that. I was talking to someone about, that moment when you're 16 and you realize you're handsome. And it's like, it's this great moment where you're like, oh, I can be really hot. Like I don't look like the cheerleaders, but I'm pulling some attention, right? But having you, StormMiguel, focus on those moments for people. I mean, it's so incredibly special.
Yeah, I definitely wanted it to be celebratory. Like of course, I wanted it to be real. Like I wanted to talk about the things that were hard and challenging, but I really wanted it to be uplifting as well. And like, that's what's cool about that's our resilience, right? We can be going through it and we can make each other laugh during those times. and go dancing or do whatever it is we need to do to be connected and celebrate ourselves and each other. We know how to lift each other up in queer community. I love that. And so, I think that being able to hold all of that and express joy and lift each other up is really important. I wanted to say one thing that I was thinking about when Charlene was talking about the premiere. There were like 500 people there minimum. And so there was it's interesting because, we have captions that, if you're watching it online, you can often toggle them off and on. And I want to make sure it was accessible. So we made sure that the captions existed, that were on the screen at the premiere. And because of all the yelling and people were like whistling throughout, I was so relieved that we had the captions up, because there was a time that people were yelling at the screen and it was just, I just wanted to reiterate what an amazing event that was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get in and out of this film screening without hearing the whistle on either side or throughout. So,
exactly.
So of course, at some point, I actually got a message from someone who said, "We're trying the whistle at home right now." So I'm going to start hearing it in North Carolina now.
Right on.
But as we think about this film, it's just a sweet, beautiful celebration of this community that took care of one another. I mean, I remember this so deeply. What a close-knit group of young dykes this was, who took care of one another. And a little bit of the film talks about, this the importance of family and the difficulty of coming out. And now we talk a lot about, creating family, created family. And so as you all think about the way the film was balanced, right? The importance of family in New Mexico, in Catholic community, how folks were wrestling with that as, in high school. And then, as you're saying, Charlene, building families as we went forward. How important was that theme of family and queerness and showing that kind of tension?
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, Char. Yeah, because you have.
I want you to go.
Okay, rock, paper, scissors. So yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things when I was asking questions when I was interviewing folks, it was important. Like, part of the editing process is to see what are the continuing themes. What do people talk about? And so I asked many different questions to folks, generally the same questions, but if we start going in a certain path, I'll follow people in that path. And the things that, some of the things that came up that I didn't quite expect was talking about families and how people had other queer people in their families, and Catholicism and the way that it did, and the therapy's story that was told over and over again. So those are stories that I didn't really know were going to come up. But of course I didn't know, what was this going to be? I would know when I was going to be talking to folks and hear what they had to say. But family ended up being a big important part of it, and in many different ways. A lot of us talked about the ways that we came out to our families. A lot of us talked about how many people were also gay in our families, and what else there, and the ways that, like, Gloria talked about how her mom was just like, "It's okay, mija, I'm sure there's other girls out there." So there's all these really beautiful surprises that came up, and I don't know what else to say about it. It's where things went, and it felt important to stick with that, well, as people were talking about it, and make sure that it was represented, because it ended up being a very prominent part of people's experiences in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things I was thinking about that I think is kind of interesting is how, for a lot of the people that talked about struggles, like, there were struggles with moms.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I don't think anyone talks about a struggle with the dad, or which I thought was kind of interesting. And it, again, I think there's so many intersections in this movie, and just the intersection of sexism, mothers having to bear the brunt of taking on their children's whatever, and making sure that they're raised right, or all of that. I mean, I think there's just so much pressure on moms, and especially with their young daughters to figure that out. And anyways, I just thought that was interesting, that it's mostly the moms that wanted to go to therapy, or that were really tough on their kids.
I think about that a lot. I think about the difference between thinking, if you're thinking the binary gender, like what lesbians, that a lot of times I think that like mothers take it very personally if their daughters are lesbians, and dads take it very personally if their sons are gay, because it says something in this society about their own gender, or how good they did about kind of projecting that onto their child. Right. And so, I wasn't surprised to hear that it was moms a lot of the time in that regard, because just based on that line of thinking. And it also has me thinking about how different it was for us than it was for the gay guys. Yeah. They weren't running around in packs like we were. I don't think it would have been safe for them to do that. I think that there was something that we, even though we were spotted, we were called out, we were bullied, we also got to be under the radar because there wasn't a big reference point we were tomboys, we were jocks. That's how people might have seen us. They weren't going to see us necessarily right away as being gay or queer or dykes. Yeah. Whereas an effeminate boy of that age, people are automatically going to go to what they know. And there's more reference point for that. When people think gay at that time, I think they only thought guys a lot of times. And so there's a little tangent there, but I think about that when I think about how which parents respond, and how, because my dad was chill about me being, when I came out, my dad was like, oh, okay, and my mom said I had to go to therapy, and I was like, I'm not going to therapy, I'm not going to. My dad was like, well, this might not be an easy choice, and maybe this person will help you navigate it. He didn't use the word navigate, but, and I was just like, okay, well, Dad, fine.
Yeah. So before we go, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna say, like, let's hear a whistle, but before that, because I have such sweetness about this film, and I want to know, like, as you've screened this film, and Charlene, you've traveled with this film also, right? You were
virtually. I mean, we've had a virtual screening year.
Yeah.
But we did travel to San Francisco. That was the only time we really could. That was like 2 months before everything shut down. 3 months,
right.
I think.
Right. So as you all are moving in the world with this film, how do you think about this film? Do you think of it as a sort of historical document? Do you think of it as a kind of activism? What do you want viewers who are unaware, or never had the blessing of visiting the most beautiful place on earth, the motherland, what do you want them to know about yourselves in this film? Is this history? Is this activism? What is this for you as you share it with the world?
Yes, and yes. It feels like all of those things. I do feel like telling our stories this way is definitely activism. It's keeping our history alive, and it all feels really important that way. And it just also feels to me like a love story to not only Albuquerque, or a love letter to Albuquerque, but to the people in Albuquerque. And what I want people to know is, of course you can't generalize, but Albuquerque people are just genuine and kind, and generous is a thing that I have noticed since I've been away, especially. Whenever I go back, people are like, I'm always surprised, like, that people are just so like conversational and friendly and helpful, like, just every time I go back. And, you know, I also have to look at, well, I don't know. I wonder how that would be if I presented differently. But even, you know, back then when I was like butch presenting, I never felt like people in Albuquerque were like not nice, you know.
Yeah.
And not to say that people in San Francisco are, but it's a very different, like people are just friendly in Albuquerque, you know, people got to get to know you a little more here, I think. But one of the things I want people to know too about everybody in this film is how incredibly generous they were with their time, their stories, their photographs, images, and just themselves. Like everyone who was in this film gave so much of themselves and just so lovingly and willingly to this project. And so I'm just so grateful that was, you know, I was nervous going back years later and just being like, hi, I haven't seen you in a long time. And now I'm going to ask you for something really personal. And people were just so wonderful and generous. So that's what I want to say about Albuquerque people.
That's sweet. Yeah, I think, you know, I've heard StormMiguel say many times that this is a love letter to Albuquerque and to this community, and it really feels like it, and that's really lovely. And I love that, you know, there's lots of things I think in this film that show up, whether it's about, you know, just the queer community or being in a state that borders Mexico. And what that means, I mean, I love that. Oh my gosh, that was probably the biggest surprise, and I love it so much.
That was such a great surprise. That was such
it.
a great surprise. Yeah.
And you know, and just and the generational stuff. And I also think that it's a coming home story. It's StormMiguel's coming home story as a trans man, and as just coming back to, you know, I love that you're so front and center with all these lesbians around you.
Yeah.
And I think the feeling of tenderness and closeness is clear. I mean, it's obvious in the way that we're all talking to the screen. Really, you. You know, I just think that comes across so clearly with everybody that you interviewed, and I really love that. I think that's my favorite thing about the film, is just that it seems to embrace all of us really well. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah, I mean, it just absolutely. I think, we have a comment. I want to be down with your high school crew. You know, it was a great crew. I mean, I can say that, not as a marker of age, but I was a couple of grades earlier or later than y'all. And that was a crew I also wanted to be a part of, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember if it was B Hall or C Hall, but there was this whole like hallway of really cool dykes. And then I think y'all went to like, you know, StormMiguel, did you play guitar at like a lesbian bookstore? I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? That was a crew that was so visible. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I wish you would, you know, it's so funny because I always just like, where are all the ones we're supposed to, because like Shar and her crew kind of mentored us. And by mentored, I mean first place bets on who would be wrecked first. Let's be real. They did.
Yeah.
Under the table. And so we were like, where are the ones we get to bring up? And it really felt like that particular culture ended with my class. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And then, you know, because we didn't really know many people younger than us. And you know, I wonder if maybe we weren't as bold in some ways to, you know, because the folks a little older than us were pretty bold. I mean, straight up would ask us, so are you wrecked? Are you gay? What's going on? What's your story? And I think, I don't know if we were, well, we know one person who was in my grade that was more bold than I was. But yeah, I had a very good friend who was very straight up flirtatious with everybody. But Um, I never was that bold, and we didn't know. Like we just didn't. I feel like we didn't know, or there just for some reason there just wasn't quite the crop of young lesbians that came up right after us. But I always assumed that would continue and that we would kind of bring people under our wing in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of boldness, I can say that at my advanced age now as like an elder queer, the hottest I was ever picked up was by someone in your crew. You know, and it was actually kind of that between bold and subtle where you know, she was just this like really good looking and, you know, ginger hair, sort of like Charlene, and, you know, full mullet, lots of swag. And she sat in front of me in summer school, right? And used to talk me up. And I remember her asking me once, "What'd you do this weekend?" And I said, "Oh, I watched the Grammys." And I didn't know what any of this meant, but I said, you know, Tracy Chapman and Sinead O'Connor, and the best one was Melissa Etheridge.
Oh,
you know, and then she kind of leaned in like, okay. And so we took a break, and truly the best I've ever been hit on. We took a break. She came back from break, sat in front of me in geometry class, didn't say a word, turned around, put a cold Dr. Pepper on my desk and like popped it open. Didn't say anything, turned back around. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, it was like fainted, you know, because I knew what all that was, right? And so StormMiguel, you know, you all had swag, you know, you all had a different kind of subtle skills, right? But yeah, you know, absolutely this sensibility of, you know, I always say to folks that, you know, a large part of our lives is just finding our people, you know, and it's, you know, how incredible to be a teenager in high school and finding your people. I mean, it's just, what a gift.
Absolutely.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift.
It is a gift.
So as we say goodbye, and thank you all again, tell us what's next for you. You know, this is the Humanities for the Public Good What's Next Symposium. So tell us for you, what's next? What are you working on? What are you up to?
I am in the early stages of my next project, which is also going to take place in New Mexico. It's going to be a narrative, actually, in kind of a mockumentary style of me. I'm going to be in it. Going back to Roswell, where my dad was born, so I have a lot of family there. So I'm going to be going there to come out to my family as trans, and this is the narrative story. This is the fiction story. And, you know, a lot of people have some ideas about what Roswell is. And, you know, people automatically think UFOs and aliens. And so I'm going to go back to actually tell the story about the people in Roswell. And we're going to find out that everybody's thinking about UFOs and aliens, and to my chagrin. So, so that's as much as I, you know, I'm still working on the outline of it, and I'm going to plan hopefully a research trip, if it's safe enough, this summer. And and it's going to be a hybrid. I'm hoping to actually interview some of my family members to be in the film, like as part of the film, like have their interviews in it. So yeah, I'm just working on it right now. I have a couple folks that are on board to be a part of it, and taking improv classes and trying to bone up those skills. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's pretty exciting.
Right on.
Yeah. And
Charlene, what are you up to?
Well, I don't know. Whatever I can be up to, I guess. No, I mean,
you know, the old New Mexico response is up to no good, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, staying home, doing things that are, you know, I mean, as you said, I work in a lot of small towns, and I'm used to traveling a lot. And this year has been no travel, and it's really different. So I'm looking forward to when that can start again, but it may not be for a while. So anyways, but I'm really, really busy. So that's good, and doing lots of stuff. And New Mexico is always changing, always something different. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, good.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. It's we're so fortunate to have you. We're so fortunate to have the film in the world. Such generosity sharing your stories, both in the film and in the conversation. We appreciate your time so much. I'm going to tell our tech folks we're going to go out with a whistle, maybe, if we can do it.
Okay.
Want to try it out?
I tried it with this fake tooth, but let's see what happens.
All right.
Absolutely. Good.
We all gonna do it?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wise.
Let's try.
Okay. I mean, I'm not picking up any ladies with that whistle, but I'll work on it. I'll work on it.
Maybe some chihuahuas, but
Yeah, my dog woke up, but that's about it. It's good to see
thank
you
you so
all.
much.
I
This is so
hope
much
to see
fun.
you all soon. Take
Thanks, Annette.
care.
Thanks, Star.